Have you ever seen a life shatter in an instant? Picture this. Isabella Montgomery, 6 months pregnant and radiating joy, sits at a lavish dinner table. Her husband, billionaire industrialist Ethan Montgomery, is across from her, his hand resting on hers. Their life seems perfect. Then his phone buzzes. He whispers a hurried apology, something about a sudden business emergency. He kisses her cheek, promises to be back soon, and walks out. But he wasn't heading to a boardroom. He was heading to a private jet. His mistress was already on board. The next morning, Isabella wouldn't be waking up to his return. She'd be waking up to her face pregnant and betrayed plastered across every major news channel in the country. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of how a woman's perfect world became a public spectacle and how she fought back from the ashes. The crystal glasses at La Perle shimmered, catching the light from the chandeliers and fracturing it into 1,000 tiny rainbows on the pristine white tablecloth. It was the kind of light that made everything and everyone look flawless. From across the table, Isabella Montgomery watched her husband Ethan and felt a familiar, comforting warmth spread through her chest. He was captivating even after 5 years of marriage. His dark hair was styled with a casual precision. His jawline was sharp, and the custom-tailored Tom Ford suit he wore did little to hide the powerful physique beneath. He was talking to the Hendersons, a couple whose net worth hovered near the 10-digit mark, about market fluctuations and emerging tech. He spoke with an easy authority that drew people in, making them feel like they were part of his orbit, the center of his universe. For 5 years, Isabella had been the sun in that universe. Now, another was rising. Their life was a meticulously curated masterpiece. Their penthouse on Park Avenue offered sweeping views of Central Park, a sea of green and gray that Ethan had conquered. Their weekends were spent at their sprawling estate in the Hamptons or on spontaneous trips to St. Bart's. They were the golden couple, the envy of their social circle, their pictures frequently gracing the pages of Vogue and Town and Country. And now the masterpiece was about to be complete. Isabella was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son. She rested a hand on the gentle curve of her stomach, a secret smile playing on her lips. She had everything a woman could ever want. Or so she told herself. Lately, however, a discordant note had crept into their perfect symphony. It was subtle at first. Late-night meetings that stretched into the early hours. The scent of an unfamiliar perfume, faint and floral, clinging to his jacket. A new passcode on his phone, which was now perpetually face down on his nightstand. When she'd gently questioned him, he'd laughed it off, his deep voice smooth as velvet. Sweetheart, Montgomery Industries is closing the biggest merger of its history. It's all-consuming. Just a few more weeks, I promise. Then it's just you and me and our little guy. He would kiss her, then a deep, possessive kiss that was meant to reassure, but lately only served to smother her rising unease. He called her paranoid lovingly, of course, and blamed it on pregnancy hormones. She had almost started to believe him. Almost. "Isabella, darling, you're glowing," Patricia Henderson exclaimed, her voice pulling Isabella from her thoughts. Patricia's face was a testament to the finest cosmetic surgeons in Manhattan, smooth and largely immobile. "Pregnancy certainly agrees with you." Isabella offered a genuine smile, the baby kicking softly as if in agreement. "Thank you, Patricia. We're very excited." Ethan reached across the table, his large, warm hand covering hers. His thumb stroked her knuckles. It was a practiced gesture, one he'd performed 1,000 times. Publicly, he was the doting husband, the adoring father-to-be. "I'm the luckiest man alive," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at her. The smile didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a performer's smile, and Isabella, his most devoted audience, was starting to see the artifice. The conversation flowed around them, a river of talk about charity galas, art auctions, and the nightmare of summer traffic to the Hamptons. Isabella played her part, nodding, smiling, asking the right questions. But her focus was a tight knot in her stomach. Ethan's phone, resting on the table beside his plate, had been silent all evening. It was a new phone she'd noticed a week ago, a sleek, unfamiliar model. His old one, he'd claimed, had fried itself. As the waiters cleared their main course plates, it happened. A soft buzz. Not a ring, but a low, insistent vibration against the polished wood of the table. Every head turned. In their world, a phone call interrupting a dinner at La Pearl was a minor sacrilege. Ethan's eyes flickered to the screen. For a fraction of a second, his mask slipped, a flash of irritation quickly replaced by something else, something that looked suspiciously like anticipation. He picked up the phone, glancing at the screen. Isabella watched his thumb hover over the decline icon. He was going to ignore it, she thought with a surge of relief. He was going to choose them, this dinner, this moment. He didn't. His thumb slid the other way. He brought the phone to his ear, his back straightening. "Excuse me," he murmured to the table, his voice a low, urgent hum. "I have to take this." He stood up tall and imposing and walked away from the table, weaving through the maze of waiters and diners toward the restaurant's opulent lobby. Isabella's gaze followed him, a cold dread washing over her. It wasn't a business call. She knew it. The way he had looked at the phone, the guarded urgency in his posture, it was personal, intimate. Patricia Henderson gave a delicate, theatrical sigh. The curse of a powerful man. The work never stops. Her husband, a portly man named Robert, grunted in agreement. But Isabella knew better. This wasn't work. She could feel it in her bones, in the sudden stillness of the baby in her womb. A premonition, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, pierced the warm bubble of her denial. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The dessert menus were offered and politely declined. The Hendersons were starting to look restless. Isabella's smile felt frozen on her face. She kept glancing toward the lobby, expecting, praying to see him returning, an apologetic look on his face. Finally he reappeared. But he wasn't walking back to their table. He was walking toward the exit, a valet holding the door open for him. He caught her eye from across the room. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a gesture of apology that felt more like a dismissal. Then he raised his phone to his ear again and was gone, swallowed by the New York night. The silence at the table was deafening. Robert Henderson cleared his throat awkwardly. Patricia patted Isabella's hand, her sympathy as manufactured as her cheekbones. "My dear, don't you worry. I'm sure it's a terrible crisis at the office." Isabella felt a strange calm descend upon her. The knot of anxiety in her stomach had dissolved, replaced by a hollow certainty. She slowly folded her napkin, placing it beside her untouched plate. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the chaos erupting within her. "I'm sure it is." She allowed Robert to handle the bill, graciously accepted their offers to see her home, and lied, saying her driver was waiting just outside. She needed to be alone. As she stepped out of the restaurant's gilded doors and into the cool night air, the city lights seemed to mock her. Each glittering skyscraper was a monument to the world Ethan had built, a world in which she was now a foreigner. She hailed a cab, the yellow car a beacon in the blur of her unshed tears. As it pulled away from the curb, she saw it, Ethan's town car, a sleek black Maybach, was still parked where the valet had left it. He hadn't taken his own car. The driver had asked for a destination. "Just drive," she whispered, her hand protectively covering her belly. The baby was hers. This child, this tiny innocent life, was hers alone. The certainty of it was the only solid thing in a world that had just crumbled into dust. She didn't know where Ethan had gone, but she knew with a chilling finality that he hadn't gone to a meeting. And he wouldn't be coming home. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. The first crack in the gilded cage had appeared, and it was threatening to bring the whole glittering structure down around her. The penthouse felt cavernous and cold when Isabella finally let herself in. The floor-to-ceiling windows, which usually offered a breathtaking panorama of the city's electric heartbeat, now seemed like giant judging eyes looking in on her hollow life. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft click of the lock and the distant, mournful wail of a siren. She had walked these marble floors thousands of times, but tonight they felt alien, the opulent furniture like museum pieces from a life that was no longer hers. She went through the motions of her nightly routine, a robot programmed for a life that had been a lie. She changed into a silk nightgown, washed her face, and brushed her teeth, staring at her reflection in the vast mirror of their ensuite bathroom. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a pain so deep it hadn't yet found an exit in the form of tears. She looked at the swell of her stomach, the gentle mound that held all her hopes and dreams. A wave of nausea, sharp and acidic, rose in her throat. Was he thinking of them? Of her? Of his son? Sleep was a distant country she couldn't reach. She lay in their king-sized bed, the space beside her feeling like a desolate, empty continent. The sheets still held the faint masculine scent of his cologne, a cruel reminder of his presence, his absence. At 2 a.m. she gave up. Her mind was a racetrack of horrifying possibilities. Had there been an accident, a medical emergency? But the calm, dismissive way he had left the fact he hadn't taken his own car. No, this was something else. This was a choice. Her unease finally coalesced into a single burning point of focus: his study. It was his sanctuary, the one room she rarely entered. A masculine domain of dark wood leather and the smell of old books and expensive whiskey. He had always been fiercely private about it. Now his privacy felt like a locked door she had to break down. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed open the heavy oak door. The room was dark save for the glow of the city filtering through the window. She didn't turn on the lights. She felt her way to his large mahogany desk, her fingers tracing its polished surface until they found his laptop. It was closed. She opened it. The screen lit up asking for a password. She tried her birthday. Access denied. His birthday. Access denied. Their anniversary. Access denied. Frustration and despair warred within her. She was about to give up when her eyes fell on a small framed photo on the corner of the desk. It was a picture of them from their honeymoon in Santorini, both of them tanned, young, and impossibly happy. Tucked just behind the frame was a small yellow sticky note. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. On it, in his familiar bold handwriting, was a single word: Odyssey. Her breath hitched. The Odyssey. It was the book he was reading when they first met, a leather-bound copy he carried everywhere. It was their inside joke. He was Odysseus the epic traveler, and she was his Penelope waiting faithfully for him to come home. The irony was a physical blow. She typed the word. Access granted. The screen opened to his desktop, a clean, organized interface. For a moment she felt a pang of guilt. This was a violation, a trespass of the highest order. But the image of him walking out of the restaurant, abandoning her pregnant and alone, burned away her hesitation. She had a right to know. She didn't know what she was looking for. His emails, his documents. Her eyes scanned the icons until they landed on one that made her blood run cold. It was a cloud storage application, one she didn't recognize. The icon was a sleek silver S. She clicked on it. It opened without a password, already logged in. The interface was a grid of photo albums. The titles were innocuous. Project Nightingale. Geneva Presentation. Maldives Proposal. Her hand shook as she moved the cursor over the last one. Maldives Proposal. He had told her it was a pitch for a new sustainable resort. He had been working on it for weeks, he'd said. The cause of so many of his late nights. She clicked. The album opened and Isabella forgot how to breathe. The air was stolen from her lungs, leaving a vacuum of pure shock. It wasn't a proposal. It was a vacation. A very recent one. The first photo was of a woman. She was stunningly beautiful, with long, sun-bleached blonde hair, a deep, even tan, and a smile that was both innocent and predatory. She was standing on the deck of a yacht, the turquoise water of the Maldives a brilliant backdrop. She was wearing a tiny white bikini that left little to the imagination. In the next photo, she was laughing, her head thrown back as Ethan sprayed her with champagne. He looked relaxed, happy, utterly captivated. a kind of happy she hadn't seen in years. Isabella clicked through the photos, each one a fresh stab to her heart. Ethan and the woman whose name she saw from a file name was Chloe Sterling, dining on a private beach, their faces illuminated by candlelight. Chloe wrapped in one of Ethan's dress shirts, making breakfast in the kitchen of a luxurious overwater bungalow. Ethan and Chloe asleep on a hammock, his arm thrown protectively over her bare stomach. And then the final picture, the one that shattered the last vestiges of Isabella's composure. It was a close-up shot. Chloe was holding up her left hand to the camera. On her ring finger was a diamond, a magnificent cushion-cut diamond that dwarfed the one Ethan had given Isabella. It was an engagement ring, and behind her, out of focus but unmistakable, was Ethan smiling. The photo was dated 2 weeks ago, during the time he was supposedly pulling all-nighters for the merger. A raw guttural sob was torn from Isabella's throat. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't a fling. It was a whole other life. A life he had been building while she was at home, naively picking out paint colors for a nursery. The Maldives proposal wasn't for a resort. It was for a new wife. She slammed the laptop shut, the crack of plastic echoing in the silent room. The betrayal was so immense, so audacious, it was almost incomprehensible. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had replaced her. He was building a new life on the foundations of their old one, and she was just collateral damage, a problem to be managed. The phone call at the restaurant. It hadn't been a crisis. It had been a summons. Chloe was waiting. Their real life was calling, and he had answered, leaving his pregnant wife at the dinner table without a second thought. The sudden business emergency was a flight not to a meeting but to a romantic getaway. St. Moritz, perhaps, or a private island only he knew of. The tears came then, hot and furious. She stumbled back from the desk, her body racked with violent sobs. She sank to the floor, her hands protectively clutching her belly as if she could shield her unborn son from the poison of his father's deceit. The gilded cage had not just cracked, it had been blown apart, and she was in free fall with no safety net in sight. The name Chloe Sterling was seared into her brain, a brand marking the end of everything she had ever known. And in the dark, cavernous penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of a life that was a lie, Isabella Montgomery finally understood the chilling truth: she was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Isabella didn't sleep. The night was a blur of tears, rage, and a hollowing grief that felt bottomless. She alternated between pacing the vast expanse of the penthouse like a caged animal and curling into a ball on the cold bathroom floor, her hand never leaving her stomach. Every time she closed her eyes, the images assaulted her: Ethan's carefree smile on the yacht, Chloe's triumphant face, the blinding sparkle of that diamond ring. He had proposed to another woman while his wife was carrying his child. The sheer calculated cruelty of it was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in soft shades of rose and gray. It felt like an intrusion, a violation of her private agony. The world was waking up, oblivious to the fact that hers had ended. Exhaustion finally claimed her, and she fell into a fitful, dream-haunted sleep on the living room sofa, still wrapped in her silk nightgown. She was jolted awake a few hours later by the insistent, shrill ringing of her phone. She fumbled for it on the coffee table, her mind still thick with a sleep-deprived fog. The screen showed her mother's name. She let it go to voicemail. A second later it rang again. Her sister, then her best friend Amelia, then a number she didn't recognize, and another. The phone buzzed and chimed relentlessly, a frantic electronic swarm. A knot of pure dread tightened in her stomach. This wasn't just friends and family checking in. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. With a trembling hand, she finally answered the call from Amelia. "Izzy! Oh my God, Izzy, are you okay? Are you watching the news?" "Don't watch the news." Amelia's voice was frantic, pitched high with panic. The warning, of course, had the opposite effect. What news, Amelia? What's going on? Just don't turn on the TV. I'm coming over. I'm in a cab. I'll be there in 10 minutes. But Isabella couldn't wait. The dread was now a full-blown terror. She hung up her fingers numb as she fumbled for the television remote. The giant screen on the wall flickered to life. She didn't have to change the channel. It was on every single one. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. They were all running the same story. And there on the screen was her life. Or rather, the smoldering wreckage of it. The headline was stark and brutal, emblazoned across the bottom of the screen in a bold yellow font. Billionaire Ethan Montgomery abandons pregnant wife for socialite Chloe Sterling. Her own face stared back at her. It was a recent photo from a charity gala, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, a joyful, unsuspecting smile on her face. Beside it was a photo of Ethan looking handsome and powerful, and next to his a picture of Chloe Sterling looking smug and radiant, snapped at an airport. She was climbing the steps of a private jet, a Gucci travel bag slung over her shoulder. The location stamp on the news graphic read, Teterboro Airport last night. A female news anchor was speaking in a grave, serious tone. We are getting shocking reports this morning about industrialist tycoon Ethan Montgomery. Sources confirm that Montgomery, fifth on the Forbes list of youngest billionaires, left a dinner with his wife of 5 years, Isabella Montgomery, last night to rendezvous with his mistress, social media influencer and heiress Chloe Sterling. The screen split, showing paparazzi footage. It was blurry shot from a distance but unmistakable. It was Ethan last night getting out of a black SUV at Teterboro Airport. He was on the phone, the same phone he had taken the call on at the restaurant. He looked agitated, glancing around before hurrying up the steps of the Gulfstream G650. The tail number was clearly visible. His jet. The couple? The anchor continued, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. Then departed for an undisclosed location believed to be a private island in the Caribbean. The story takes a particularly heartbreaking turn as sources close to the couple have confirmed that Isabella Montgomery is 6 months pregnant with their first child. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. She sank back onto the sofa, her hand flying to her mouth. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare. Her private humiliation, her deepest pain, was being broadcast to millions. It was a spectator sport. The report continued, relentless and invasive. A relationship expert was brought on via video link to analyze the psychology of the billionaire mindset. A gossip columnist recounted rumors of Ethan and Chloe being spotted together in Monaco and London over the past few months, rumors Isabella had never heard. They showed pictures from Chloe Sterling's Instagram, a carefully curated feed of luxury travel designer clothes and sponsored posts. They even had a statement from a friend of Chloe's. Chloe is a wonderful person, a young woman with expertly applied makeup said to a reporter. She and Ethan are deeply in love. It's unfortunate about the circumstances, but you can't help who you fall in love with. Ethan wasn't happy in his marriage. He was planning on leaving her. The words hit Isabella like a physical assault. He was planning on leaving her. The lie was so blatant, so cruel, it stole the air from her lungs. He hadn't been planning anything. He had been living a double life, and she, his pregnant wife, was being painted as the obstacle to his true happiness. The final blow came when the anchor, with a somber look, said, "We have an exclusive statement from Montgomery Industries' PR department." A sterile corporate message flashed on the screen. "This is a private matter for the Montgomery family. We ask that you respect their privacy during this difficult time. Mr. Montgomery remains fully committed to his duties as CEO of Montgomery Industries." Privacy. They asked for privacy after her life had been dissected on national television. It was a joke. A sick, twisted joke. The statement wasn't for her. It was for the shareholders. It was damage control. She wasn't Isabella Montgomery, a grieving pregnant wife. She was a potential liability to the company's stock price. She turned off the television, plunging the room back into silence. But the images were burned onto the inside of her eyelids. Her face pregnant and smiling. Chloe's face triumphant and beautiful. Ethan's face captured in a moment of betrayal. The whole world had seen it. Her colleagues, her friends, her family, strangers on the street. They were all looking at her, pitying her, judging her. The golden girl had fallen, and her fall was a public spectacle. The intercom buzzed and the doorman announced Amelia's arrival. When Isabella opened the door, Amelia rushed in her face, a mask of worry. She wrapped Isabella in a tight hug, and it was only then that Isabella's body remembered how to function. The shock receded, and a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated rage surged through her. "He'll pay for this, Izzy," Amelia whispered fiercely, stroking her hair. "I swear to God we'll make him pay for this." Isabella pulled back, her eyes dry and burning. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard fire. She looked past Amelia at the windows overlooking the city Ethan thought he owned. He had tried to erase her, to dismiss her as a chapter he was closing. He had made her a public victim, a footnote in his love story with Chloe Sterling. "No," Isabella said, her voice low and dangerously calm. "He won't just pay. He'll regret the day he ever thought he could discard me." In the heart of her public humiliation, a new resolve was forged. She wasn't just a pregnant wife. She wasn't just a victim on the news. She was Isabella Montgomery. And she was about to show her husband and the world what that really meant. The spectacle wasn't over. She was about to become the main event. The days that followed the news report were a suffocating fog. Isabella's penthouse, once a symbol of success, became a luxurious prison. Outside, a pack of paparazzi had set up camp, their long-lensed cameras aimed at her windows like sniper rifles, waiting for a shot of the grieving wife. Every delivery, every visitor was documented with a frenzy of clicking shutters. Her face, juxtaposed with Chloe's, was on the cover of every tabloid at the checkout counter. The headlines screaming variations of "Billionaire's Betrayal" and "From Penthouse to Pain." Her phone was a source of constant torment. Voicemails piled up, a cacophony of pity, morbid curiosity, and unwanted advice. Her mother cried. Her father, a stoic man of few words, promised to ruin Ethan, a threat that was both touching and utterly futile against the Montgomery empire. Ethan's own parents, the formidable senior Montgomerys, had sent a curt formal email expressing their disappointment and assuring her that their family's lawyers would be in touch to handle the transition smoothly. It was clear where their loyalties lay with their son and the preservation of the family brand. Amelia became her gatekeeper, her shield. She moved into one of the guest suites, fielding calls, managing the household staff who walked around with downcast, sympathetic eyes, and ensuring Isabella ate. Most meals, however, Isabella just pushed around her plate, the thought of food making her stomach churn. The only thing that mattered was the tiny life inside her. For him, she drank the nutrient shakes Amelia prepared. For him, she forced herself to breathe. Ethan himself was a ghost. There was no call, no text, no email. Just a deafening, calculated silence. He had vanished from her life as completely as if he had never existed. His only presence, the lingering scent in his closet, and the brutal headlines that bore his name. His lawyers, however, were not silent. A crisp, impersonal letter arrived via courier informing her that Mr. Montgomery had filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. It also informed her that he was prepared to offer a generous settlement, the details of which would be forthcoming, contingent on her signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. She read the letter in the sterile quiet of her living room, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside. A generous settlement. An NDA. He wanted to buy her silence, to package her pain into a neat financial transaction so he could move on unencumbered to his new life with Chloe. He was treating her like a fired employee, not the woman who had shared his bed for 5 years, the mother of his unborn child. That night, something inside her shifted. The grief, while still a raw, open wound, was momentarily eclipsed by a white-hot fury. She had spent days marinating in victimhood, drowning in the public's pity. She had allowed him to define her as the abandoned pregnant wife. No more. The next morning she woke with a purpose. She showered and dressed not in the silk pajamas she'd been living in, but in a smart black dress, a string of her grandmother's pearls around her neck. She looked at her reflection. The pallor was still there, the dark circles under her eyes, but there was a new light in their depths. A glint of steel. "Amelia," she said, her voice clear and firm. "I need you to get me a name. Not just a good divorce lawyer. I want the best. I want a shark. The kind of lawyer that makes men like Ethan Montgomery wake up in a cold sweat." Amelia, who was arranging a bouquet of sympathy lilies with a grimace, looked up, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Now you're talking, Izzy. I know just the person." The name Amelia gave her was Anelise Reed. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a legend in the rarefied world of high-stakes divorces. Known for her razor-sharp intellect, her take-no-prisoners approach, and her astronomical fees, she was the go-to attorney for jilted wives of the 1%. She didn't just win settlements, she dismantled empires. Getting a meeting was an ordeal in itself, a testament to her exclusivity. But the name Isabella Montgomery carried its own weight, and the very public nature of her situation was exactly the kind of high-profile case Anelise excelled at. A video consultation was scheduled for the following afternoon. Isabella spent the intervening hours preparing. She gathered her thoughts, her memories, every lie Ethan had told her, every broken promise. She printed out the photos from his secret cloud album, the images of him and Chloe in the Maldives. She laid them out on the dining room table, a mosaic of his betrayal. Looking at them no longer made her want to cry. It made her want to fight. When the call connected, Anelise Reed appeared on the screen. She was an impeccably dressed woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through the screen. She didn't offer condolences or sympathy. She got straight to the point. "Mrs. Montgomery," she began, her voice crisp and businesslike, "I've reviewed the preliminary information. Your husband is represented by Sterling, Cromwell and Finch, a formidable firm, but their primary focus is corporate law. They're out of their depth. This is a good thing." Isabella felt a flicker of hope. "He's offered me a settlement, in exchange for an NDA. Anelise gave a short, sharp laugh. "Of course he has. Let me be clear, Mrs. Montgomery. We will not be signing an NDA. Not now, not ever. Your story is your most valuable asset. He made it public. We're going to use that. The narrative right now is that you are a victim. We are going to change that narrative. You are not a victim. You are a mother protecting her child's future." Anelise's confidence was a balm on Isabella's frayed nerves. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't alone in the fight. His statement, Anelise continued, mentioned irreconcilable differences. That's a no-fault term. We, however, will be filing on the grounds of adultery. We will be naming Chloe Sterling in the filing. We will subpoena him, their travel records, their credit card statements. We will make this so public, so messy, that the Montgomery Industries Board of Directors will start to see him not as a brilliant CEO, but as a reckless liability. Isabella listened, captivated. Anelise was outlining a war, and she was handing Isabella the battle plan. "Now," Anelise said, her gaze intensifying. "Tell me everything. Don't leave out a single detail, no matter how small or painful. Every late night, every suspicious text, every whispered phone call. This is not about emotions anymore, Mrs. Montgomery. This is about ammunition." And so Isabella talked. She talked for over an hour, her voice growing stronger and more confident with every word. She told Anelise about the dinner, the phone call, the discovery on his laptop. She spoke of the life he had promised her, and the secret one he had been living. As she laid bare the anatomy of his betrayal, she felt a profound sense of release. The shame was lifting, replaced by a cold, clear-eyed resolve. When she was finished, Anelise nodded slowly. "Good. This is very good. He's arrogant. He underestimated you. That is his weakness, and that is what we will exploit." After the call ended, Isabella walked over to the window. The paparazzi were still there, a patient pack of wolves, but they no longer looked like a threat. They looked like an audience. Ethan had wanted a quiet, tidy exit. He had made a spectacle of her, thinking it would break her. He was about to find out he hadn't created a victim. He had created an adversary. And she, with Anelise Reed by her side, was just beginning to fight back. A glimmer of strength born in the ashes of her public humiliation was igniting into a flame. The weeks that followed the hiring of Anelise Reed marked a tectonic shift in Isabella's existence. The fog of grief began to burn away, replaced by the stark clarity of strategy. Anelise's first move was a masterpiece of legal aggression. She filed a countersuit against Ethan for divorce on the grounds of flagrant adultery, and in a move that sent shockwaves through Manhattan's elite social circles, she named Chloe Sterling as a co-respondent. The filing wasn't just a legal document, it was a press release. Anelise ensured it was leaked to the same news outlets that had reported Isabella's humiliation. The narrative began to pivot. The headlines shifted from billionaire's betrayal to pregnant wife fights back. Paparazzi shots of Isabella, which previously sought a broken weeping woman, now captured her entering Anelise's formidable office building. Her head held high, her hand resting on her stomach, not in vulnerability, but in a gesture of maternal defiance. She was no longer just the victim. She was becoming the protagonist of her own story. Anelise's team was a whirlwind of efficiency. They were forensic accountants, private investigators, and legal prodigies who moved with the swift, silent precision of a special ops team. While Ethan's corporate lawyers were accustomed to boardroom negotiations, Anelise's team specialized in unearthing personal and financial skeletons. A man like Ethan Montgomery, Anelise explained during one of their strategy sessions in her sleek, minimalist office, believes his wealth is a fortress. We're not going to attack the fortress head-on. We're going to find the secret tunnels he's dug underneath it. The first tunnel they unearthed was financial. While the world saw Ethan as a self-made industrialist, Anelise's forensic accountants, a notoriously dogged pair of brothers named Marco and Julian Vance, discovered a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations. It wasn't just about hiding money from the IRS. It was about hiding it from Isabella. Millions of dollars of marital assets, money that was legally half hers, had been systematically siphoned off over the past 2 years, funneled into untraceable accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. "He wasn't just planning to leave you, Isabella," Anelise said, pointing to a complex flow chart on a large screen. "He was planning to leave you with next to nothing. The generous settlement he offered, it was a pittance, a fraction of what you are legally entitled to." The discovery was sickening, but it was also empowering. This wasn't just a crime of passion, it was a premeditated financial assault. It hardened Isabella's resolve, transforming her pain into cold, hard determination. She started attending every meeting, absorbing the complex financial jargon her mind once occupied with nursery designs, now grappling with asset allocation and international finance law. She was learning the language of her husband's world, not to be a part of it, but to dismantle it. But the most significant discovery came from a private investigator, a former MI6 agent named David Chen, who had been tasked with digging into Chloe Sterling's background. On the surface, Chloe was exactly what she appeared to be: an heiress to a modest fortune, a C-list socialite who had leveraged her looks into a moderately successful career as an Instagram influencer. But Chen was thorough. He looked past the curated photos of yachts and champagne and found something far more interesting. "Chloe Sterling has a brother," Chen reported, his voice calm over the speakerphone. "His name is Marcus Sterling. He's not an influencer, he's a hedge fund manager, a particularly ruthless one known for hostile takeovers." Anelise leaned forward. "Go on." "For the past 6 months," Chen continued, "Marcus Sterling's fund, Sterling Capital, has been quietly, very quietly accumulating a significant position in Montgomery Industries. Not enough to trigger any SEC alarms, but enough to be significant. He's been using various smaller funds to mask the purchases." A silence fell over the room. Isabella looked at Anelise, whose sharp eyes were narrowed in concentration. "And here's the twist," Chen said, a note of triumph in his voice. "The bulk of this purchasing activity started about 3 weeks before Ethan Montgomery's vacation to the Maldives. And the funds to make these purchases, our preliminary tracing suggests a significant portion originated from an anonymous benefactor in the Cayman Islands." The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. "My God," Isabella whispered, standing up and walking to the window. "It wasn't just an affair." Anelise finished her thought. It was a corporate espionage operation, with sex. The vacation to the Maldives, the proposal, the public affair. It was all a charade. A brilliantly executed, diabolically cruel piece of theater designed to distract Ethan to cloud his judgment while Chloe's brother prepared for a corporate raid. Chloe wasn't just a mistress. She was a weapon. And Ethan, the master of the universe, the brilliant tycoon, had been played for a fool. And the money from the Caymans? Isabella said, her mind racing. It was Ethan's money, the money he was hiding from me. Precisely, Anelise confirmed. We believe Chloe somehow gained access to those offshore accounts. She fed the account numbers, the access codes to her brother. Then she used the affair as the perfect cover. She didn't just steal his heart. She stole his capital and used it to fund an attack on his own company. The revelation was staggering. It recontextualized everything. Ethan wasn't just a cruel, cheating husband. He was a mark. A gullible, arrogant man so blinded by a pretty face and a new romance that he had failed to see the viper in his bed. His decision to abandon Isabella wasn't just an act of personal betrayal. It was an act of catastrophic business negligence. He had left the dinner table not just for a tryst, but to unknowingly participate in the orchestration of his own professional demise. Isabella felt a strange, dizzying mix of emotions. There was no satisfaction in knowing Ethan had been duped, only a profound sense of the waste and destruction. But beneath it all, a new, powerful idea began to form. Ethan's weakness, his arrogance, his catastrophic affair with Chloe. They had not only given her grounds for divorce, but they had also handed her the key to the entire kingdom. Anelise, Isabella said, turning away from the window, her eyes shining with a fierce, newfound light. The board of directors for Montgomery Industries. They don't know about this yet, do they? Anelise allowed herself a small, predatory smile. Not yet. But they're about to have a very, very bad day. The phoenix was rising. Isabella was no longer fighting for a settlement. She was fighting for control. She had the one thing that could save Montgomery Industries from the Sterling siblings' hostile takeover, the truth. And she was about to leverage it for everything it was worth. The abandoned wife was about to become the most powerful player in the game. The stage for the final act was not a courtroom, but the place where Ethan Montgomery derived his power, the 60th floor boardroom of Montgomery Industries. It was a cathedral of corporate might with a monolithic marble table and a panoramic view of the city that Ethan had once considered his kingdom. But today, he was not on his throne. He was seated at the far end of the table, looking diminished and pale, flanked by his stunned-looking corporate lawyers. At the head of the table sat Isabella. She had requested the meeting an emergency session with the board of directors. They had gathered a collection of grim-faced, silver-haired men and women who controlled the company's destiny, their expressions a mixture of confusion and irritation. They thought they were there to discuss the PR fallout from Ethan's messy personal life. They had no idea they were about to witness a coup. Isabella was the picture of calm, controlled power. She wore a tailored navy blue dress that accentuated her pregnant form not as a sign of weakness, but as a symbol of the future. Anelise Reed sat to her right, a file folder placed neatly in front of her. To her left sat Julian Vance, one of the forensic accountants, his laptop open and ready. "Thank you all for coming." Isabella began, her voice steady and clear, resonating with an authority that silenced the room. "I know my presence here is unusual. You know me as Ethan's wife. You know me from the news as the woman he left behind. Today I am here as the single largest private shareholder in this company, aside from Ethan himself." This was true. Her prenuptial agreement, which Ethan had considered ironclad, had stipulated a significant, though non-voting block of shares in her name. It had been a gift, a symbol of their union. Now it was her weapon. A murmur went through the board. Ethan shifted in his seat, his eyes for the first time meeting hers from across the vast table. She saw shock in them, and for the first time a flicker of fear. He had expected her to be at home crying, not here at the head of his table. For the past several weeks, Isabella continued, her gaze sweeping across the powerful faces in the room. My legal team has been conducting a thorough investigation into my husband's activities. We were preparing for a divorce. But what we found was not just infidelity. We uncovered a conspiracy to defraud this company. She nodded to Julian Vance. With a few clicks, the large screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to life. It displayed a complex chart, the one Anelise had shown her, detailing the flow of money from Montgomery Industries through Ethan's personal offshore accounts and into the hands of Sterling Capital. As you can see, Anelise explained in her crisp, no-nonsense tone, Mr. Montgomery has been careless. He allowed his mistress, Chloe Sterling, access to sensitive financial information she then passed to her brother Marcus Sterling, who has been using Mr. Montgomery's own money siphoned from marital assets to orchestrate a hostile takeover of this very company. The room erupted. Board members shot to their feet, shouting questions, their faces masks of disbelief and fury. Ethan looked like he had been struck by lightning. He stared at the screen, at the undeniable proof of his own folly, his face ashen. The name Sterling Capital was the final nail in his coffin. He knew what it meant. He looked from the screen to Isabella, a dawning horror in his eyes. He finally understood. This is an outrageous lie," he stammered, finding his voice. "She's a scorned wife trying to ruin me." "Is it Ethan?" Isabella asked, her voice cutting through the noise. She looked directly at him, her expression unreadable. "Did you not take a trip to the Maldives with Miss Sterling? Did you not propose to her? Did you not leave me your pregnant wife at a dinner table to fly off with her on a private jet? Your recklessness, your arrogance has put every single person in this room and the thousands of employees of this company at risk." The board fell silent, their angry eyes now fixed on Ethan. He was no longer their brilliant, infallible leader. He was the architect of their potential ruin. "Sterling Capital now controls nearly 19% of this company's voting stock," Anelise stated calmly. "They are poised to make their move. But we have something they don't. We have the proof of collusion. We have the evidence of wire fraud. We can tie this up in the SEC and the courts for years. But that would be a long, bloody, and public battle that would drag the company's stock through the mud." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Or," she said, "there is another way." This was the moment. The culmination of all the pain, the strategy, the sleepless nights. "I am prepared to hand over all of our findings to this board," Isabella announced. "The evidence you need to neutralize Sterling Capital and protect this company. In return, I have two conditions." All eyes were on her. The air was thick with tension. "First," she said, "Ethan Montgomery will resign as CEO and from his seat on the board, effective immediately." Ethan slumped in his chair as if his strings had been cut. His lawyers whispered frantically to him, but he didn't seem to hear. He just stared at Isabella, his empire crumbling around him. "Second," she continued, her voice unwavering, "his shares, his voting power will be placed into a trust that I will control as its sole trustee until my son, his son, comes of age." Checkmate. She wasn't just divorcing him. She was supplanting him. She was taking the power he had abused and placing it in her hands, not for revenge, but for the future, for her child. The board members looked at each other. They were businessmen. They saw the logic. It was a clean, swift solution to a catastrophic problem. It was ruthless, but it was effective. The chairman of the board, an old family friend of the Montgomerys named Thomas Blackwood, looked at Ethan with pity, then at Isabella with a newfound respect. "The board will need to vote," he said, his voice gravelly, but the outcome was already a foregone conclusion. As the board members began their hushed formal discussion, Isabella stood up. Her work here was done. She walked around the table, her path taking her directly past Ethan. He looked up at her, his face a wreck of confusion, despair, and a desperate pleading question. "Why?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. Isabella paused, looking down at the man who had been the center of her world, the man who had shattered it. She had expected to feel triumphant or vindicated or even hateful. Instead, she felt a strange, quiet emptiness. And then she delivered the final unexpected twist. The one detail that not even Anelise Reed knew. The one piece of the puzzle that was hers alone. "About a month before you left," she said, her voice so low only he could hear, "I had a scare. Some bleeding. I went to the doctor terrified I was losing the baby. They did an ultrasound. They did some tests." She looked him straight in the eye, letting him see the profound, unwavering truth of what she was about to say. "The baby is fine, Ethan. He's strong. But he's not yours." Ethan's eyes widened, his mind struggling to process the words. It was a lie. A beautiful, perfect, devastating lie. A lie born in the depths of her pain, a final secret revenge that no one would ever know but them. A lie that severed the very last tie that bound them together. He had tried to take everything from her. She was taking the one thing he could never reclaim, his legacy. His son. She saw the flicker of doubt war with his ego, and then the crushing realization that he would never know for sure. He had lost the right to know. Without another word, Isabella turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind the ruins of her husband's life. She didn't look back. As the heavy doors closed behind her, she rested a hand on her stomach on the son that was, and always had been, entirely hers. She had walked into that room a betrayed wife. She was walking out as the quiet, undisputed queen of the Montgomery Empire. Her fall had been a spectacle, but her rise was a silent, powerful revolution. Isabella Montgomery's story is a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest warriors. She went from a billionaire's gilded accessory to the master of her own destiny, proving that a woman's strength isn't in the life she's given, but in the life she claims for herself. Her journey from public humiliation to quiet power is a testament to resilient strategy and the fierce protective love of a mother. What did you think of the final twist? Was it the ultimate revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The hum of the ultrasound machine was supposed to be the soundtrack to the happiest day of her life. They were about to see their baby for the first time. Her husband, Torrin, a man who could buy cities, held her hand, his grip like ice. As the doctor showed them the tiny beating heart, he leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for her. What a mistake. He thought his secret was safe. He thought his money could bury the truth. But he never counted on the doctor in that room, a woman who saw more than just a picture on a screen. She saw his lie, and she was about to reveal a shocking truth that would shatter a gilded world forever. The silence in the Bentley was a familiar character in their marriage. It was a heavy, opulent silence, cushioned by hand-stitched leather and the whisper-quiet engine, but a silence nonetheless. Torrin Hawthorne, her husband of 3 years, drove with an unnerving stillness, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked streets of New York City. His profile, sharp and handsome like a Roman coin, was a mask of serene indifference. To the outside world, he was a titan of industry, the brilliant CEO of Hawthorne Holdings, a man whose Midas touch turned every venture into gold. To Katya, he was becoming a beautiful, unknowable stranger. Their home, a sprawling penthouse on Park Avenue that Torrin called the Observatory, for its floor-to-ceiling windows felt less like a home and more like a museum. Every piece of art, every piece of furniture had been chosen by him. Her life, she was beginning to realize, had also been curated. She had been a promising art historian at the Met when they met. He had swept her off her feet with a whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale, dinners in Paris, surprise trips to see the Northern Lights, a blinding diamond that felt more like a beautiful handcuff. He had convinced her to leave her job. An artist needs a patron, Katya, he'd said, and a historian needs to be surrounded by history in the making. Your work is me now. It's us. And she, blinded by love and the sheer force of his personality, had agreed. Now her days were a structured series of luncheons with the wives of his business associates, charity galas, where her only role was to smile, and where his chosen designer, and long quiet afternoons staring out at a city she lived in but no longer felt a part of. The pregnancy had been her idea, a desperate attempt to build a bridge across the growing chasm between them. She thought a baby, a piece of both of them, would force him to see her again, not just the polished accessory on his arm. When she told him, his reaction was muted. A flicker of something unreadable in his cool gray eyes, a tight smile. A Hawthorne air he'd said the words tasting of legacy and lineage, not love and joy. We'll need to adjust the nursery plans. The ride to the renowned obstetrician Dr. Anya Sharma was no different. He hadn't wanted to come. It's the 20-week scan, Torrin, she had pleaded. We'll find out the gender. It's important. He had sighed, a long-suffering sound. I have the merger with Sterling Thorn Katja. It's a delicate phase. This is more important than Sterling Thorn. She had said, a rare spark of defiance flashing within her. His jaw had tightened. Fine. I'll move my meeting with Mr. Sterling. But let's be efficient. Now in the sterile, quiet room, the scent of antiseptic cleaner sharp in the air, that efficiency was all he radiated. He checked his Patek Philippe watch twice while the technician prepped her. Katja lay on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her, her stomach bare and covered in a cold, clear gel. Dr. Sharma entered with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a sharp, observant woman in her late 40s with a reputation for being one of the best. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, ready for the big show. Ready as we'll ever be, Katja said, trying to inject some lightness into the room. Torrin simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the large monitor. The technician, a young woman named Chloe, moved the transducer across Katja's belly. A monochrome world swirled into existence on the screen. It was abstract at first, a collection of shadows and light. Then Chloe pointed, and there we are. See that little flicker? That's the heartbeat. Strong and steady. Tears instantly welled in Katja's eyes. A tiny pulsating light in the darkness. It was real. A life. Her baby. She turned to Torrin, her heart overflowing, expecting to see a reflection of her own awe. His face was stone. He wasn't looking at the heartbeat. He was looking at the vague outline of a tiny head, the curve of a minuscule spine. His hand, which had been resting limply on hers, tightened. She thought it was a gesture of shared emotion until he leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. The warmth of his breath was a stark contrast to the icy cruelty of his words. It's a mistake. The whisper was so low, so venomous, it was like a snake bite. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd misheard. The hum of the machine, the doctor's cheerful commentary, surely she'd imagined it. But then she saw the subtle shift in his jaw, the cold finality in his eyes as he looked away from the screen and stared at a blank spot on the wall. He had said it. He had looked at their child, their miracle, and declared it a mistake. The air rushed out of her lungs. The tears that had been tears of joy turned to ash, burning her cheeks. Her hand went cold in his. The room, which had felt full of life and promise a moment before, was suddenly a tomb. Dr. Sharma and Chloe were oblivious, their professional chatter filling the void. Everything looks perfect, Katja. Limbs are all there. Measurements are right on track. Do you want to know the gender? Her voice was a strangled whisper. I don't know. Torrin released her hand and stood up, smoothing his bespoke suit jacket. I have to take a call. The Sterling Thorn merger won't wait. He looked at Dr. Sharma, a mask of polite apology firmly in place. Doctor, please send the bill to my office. Katja, my driver, Thomas, will take you home. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at the screen again. He just walked out, leaving her half-naked on a paper-lined table with the ghost of his words echoing in the silent spaces of her heart. A mistake. Her baby. Their baby. A mistake. Dr. Sharma's cheerful demeanor had vanished. She looked from the empty doorway back to Katja's tear-streaked face. She turned to Chloe. Chloe, could you give Mrs. Hawthorne some privacy to get dressed? And please hold all my calls for the next 15 minutes. Once Chloe had left Dr. Chasur, Sharma pulled a stool over her expression, a mixture of professional concern and something deeper, something intensely human. She saw the devastation. She had to have seen Torrens' chilling detachment. "Katya," she said softly, her voice a lifeline. Deep breaths. "Can you tell me what happened just now?" Katya shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. He said. She couldn't repeat it. Saying it out loud would make it irrevocably real. Dr. Sharma didn't press. She simply placed a comforting hand on Katya's arm. Torrens' reaction was unusual, especially for a first-time father. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, held Katya's. "I have been a patient of the Hawthorne family's preferred hospital network for years. Torrens' medical file is extensive. I took the liberty of reviewing it before this appointment as a matter of due diligence." Katya frowned, confused. "His medical file? Why, doctor?" Sharma hesitated, as if weighing her next words on a scale of professional ethics versus human decency. There was a notation from his primary care physician, a Dr. Alistair Finch, to cross-reference his records with any spousal maternity care. It was an odd flag, so I looked into it. She took a deep breath. "Katya, what I'm about to tell you is a serious breach of patient confidentiality. But given what I just witnessed, I believe it is a matter of your safety and well-being." A cold dread, far colder than the ultrasound gel, seeped into Katya's bones. "What is it? Torren had a severe case of mumps as a teenager?" She began, her voice low and steady. "It was complicated by a condition called orchitis, inflammation of the testicles." The medical terms meant little to Katya. She was still stuck on the word mistake. The inflammation caused significant irreparable damage. Dr. Sharma continued, her gaze unwavering. "We ran a series of tests on him afterward. I have the records here. Katya, Torren Hawthorne is and has been since he was 16 years old completely and irreversibly sterile. His condition is called azoospermia. There is a 0% chance that he can conceive a child naturally." The room began to spin. The black and white image of her baby on the screen seemed to mock her. 0% chance. Sterile. Irreversible. What are you saying?" she stammered, her mind refusing to connect the dots. Dr. Sharma's voice was gentle, but her words were devastatingly clear. "I'm saying, Katya, that Torren knows he cannot be the father of your baby." The pieces clicked into place with the force of a gunshot. His muted reaction to the pregnancy, his distance, his controlling nature, and the whisper. "It's a mistake." The mistake wasn't the baby. The mistake wasn't the pregnancy. The mistake was that she had gotten pregnant at all, because he knew with absolute scientific certainty that he wasn't the father. He hadn't been accusing the baby of being a mistake. He had been accusing her. The drive home from Dr. Sharma's office was a blur. Thomas Torrens, stoic driver, navigated through the city traffic with his usual silent competence, occasionally glancing at Katya in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with what might have been concern. She sat numbly in the back of the Bentley, the plush leather feeling like a cage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, a gesture that was now fraught with a terrifying new meaning. Dr. Sharma's words echoed in her mind, a relentless, deafening drumbeat. Sterile. Irreversible. 0% chance. The doctor had been kind. She had given Katya a glass of water, a box of tissues, and the space to let the initial shock wash over her. She had also given her a warning. A man like Torren Hawthorne, with his resources and his pride. He will not take this revelation lightly, Katya. He is not a man who likes his narrative to be challenged. Be careful. She had printed a copy of the diagnostic report from Torren's file, a document dated over a decade ago, signed by a Dr. Alistair Finch, detailing the diagnosis of azoospermia. "Proof is your only power now," she'd said, sliding it into a plain manila envelope. "Guard this with your life." Back in the sterile perfection of the observatory, Katya walked through the cavernous living room like a ghost. The Warhol prints on the wall seemed to scream in silent mockery. The cityscape outside, usually a source of comfort, felt alien and menacing. Her whole life, this beautiful, curated life, was a lie, a meticulously constructed sham. She had not cheated on Torin. Not once. The very idea was absurd. She loved him, or she had loved the man she thought he was. Her mind raced frantically, trying to find an explanation. Any explanation other than the one staring her in the face. A miracle. A misdiagnosis. A 1 in a billion chance. But Dr. Sharma's certainty had been absolute. The proof was in the envelope clutched in her hand. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, then how was she pregnant? The question was a black hole threatening to swallow her whole. Torin came home late that evening. She heard his keys in the door, the soft click as he locked it behind him. She was sitting in the dark, the envelope on the marble coffee table in front of her. She hadn't moved for hours. He switched on a low lamp and the room was bathed in a soft golden glow. He loosened his tie, his movements fluid and confident. Katya. Why are you sitting in the dark? He didn't sound angry, just weary. The powerful CEO home from a long day of empire building. We need to talk, Torin, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. Can it wait? The Sterling Thorn deal is at a critical juncture. I'm exhausted. No, she said, her voice gaining strength. It can't wait. She gestured to the envelope. I had a very enlightening conversation with Dr. Sharma today, after you left. A flicker of something, anger, fear, crossed his face before being instantly suppressed, replaced by a look of paternalistic concern. He walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her, creating a deliberate distance between them. Are you all right? Is the baby okay? You seemed overwrought at the clinic. The casual cruelty of his words, the way he pretended her distress was just hormonal imbalance, ignited a fire in her chest. The baby is fine. But you know that, don't you? You saw the heartbeat. You also called our baby a mistake. He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. Katya, you misheard. The room was noisy. I was talking about the merger. Don't lie to me, Torin, she said, her voice rising. Don't you dare lie to me. I heard you perfectly, and now I know why you said it. She pushed the envelope across the table. Dr. Sharma showed me this. Your medical file. From when you were 16. He glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. A slow, cold smile spread across his lips, and the mask of the concerned husband dissolved, revealing the monster beneath. It was a chilling transformation. Dr. Sharma seems to have a problem with patient confidentiality, he said smoothly, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. I'll have my legal team address that with the hospital board. She'll be lucky to practice medicine in this state again. This isn't about Dr. Sharma. This is about you, about us. Katya was on her feet now, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. You're sterile, Torin. You have been for years. You knew you couldn't be this baby's father. You let me believe. You let me think I was going crazy. Why? He stood up, his height and presence suddenly overwhelming in the dimly lit room. He was no longer the charming man she had married. He was a predator. I didn't let you believe anything, Katya, he purred, taking a step towards her. I reacted to a simple biological fact. You came to me, told me you were pregnant. I am your husband. What was I to conclude? The implication hit her like a physical blow. You think I cheated on you. He gave a small, dismissive shrug. The science is quite clear. I cannot have children. You are having a child. The conclusion is elementary, my dear. I was willing, for the sake of appearances, to overlook your indiscretion, to raise the child as my own, to give it the Hawthorne name, the Hawthorne legacy. All I asked for was your discretion. But you couldn't even manage that. You had to create this drama. It was gaslighting of the highest order. So complete, so audacious that for a moment she almost questioned her own reality. He was twisting her fidelity into a betrayal, her joy into a scandal. He was painting himself as the magnanimous cuckolded husband willing to forgive her transgression for the sake of his name. The mistake he'd referred to wasn't just her pregnancy, it was her failure to keep the secret of her affair. "I never cheated on you," she whispered, horrified. "I would never." "Then how do you explain it?" He shot back, his voice like a whip. "A divine, immaculate conception. Did an angel visit you while I was closing the deal in Tokyo?" Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. "I don't know. That's what I'm asking you, but I know I was faithful to you." He laughed, a short, ugly sound devoid of humor. "Fidelity, a quaint concept. It doesn't matter anymore. You've made it matter. By bringing this out into the open, you've forced my hand." He walked to the bar and poured himself a whiskey, his back to her. "You will carry this child. When it is born, you will sign over all parental rights to me. I will have a non-disclosure agreement drawn up, a very generous one. You will be well compensated for your services. Then you will disappear. You will move to Europe or California, I don't care. You will never contact me or the child again." Katya stared at him aghast. "You want to buy my baby? You want me to give you my child and just leave?" "It's not your child," he said, turning to face her, his eyes like chips of ice. "Genetically, it is half yours. But it will be a Hawthorne. It will be raised as my heir. You are merely the vessel, a very beautiful but ultimately disappointing vessel." The cruelty was breathtaking. He was systematically dismantling her identity, wife, partner, and now mother. She was nothing to him but a means to an end, an incubator for an heir he desperately needed but couldn't produce himself. Her mind reeled back to the central, impossible question. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, the answer had to lie somewhere in the space between those two truths. And Torin, in his arrogance, had just given her a clue. He wasn't surprised by the pregnancy. He was angry it had become complicated. He had a plan already in place. This wasn't a shock to him. This was an inconvenience. Her fear began to morph into something else. A cold, hard resolve. He was a liar. He was a manipulator. And he had underestimated her. "No," she said, the word tasting of newfound power. He raised an eyebrow. "No, no. I will not give you my child. I will not disappear. And I will find out the truth." For the first time since she'd met him, Torin Hawthorne looked genuinely surprised. He studied her for a long moment, a predator reassessing its prey. Then he smiled again, that same chilling, empty smile. "You have nothing, Katya," he said softly. "You signed a prenuptial agreement that leaves you with exactly what you came with, which was nothing. You have no job. Your friends are my friends. Your family is—" "Where exactly?" "That brother you never speak to. You live in my home. You eat my food. You wear my clothes. You are nothing without me. Do not make the mistake of thinking you can fight me. It's a battle you will lose. Miserably." He finished his whiskey and placed the glass down with a decisive click. "The offer stands until the day you give birth. Think carefully about your next move, because I will be thinking about mine." He walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the silence. But this time the silence was different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the clarion call of war. He was right about one thing. She had a brother. A brother she hadn't spoken to in years because he'd seen the monster in Torin long before she had. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. She scrolled through the contacts past the names of society wives and charity organizers until she found the one she was looking for, Liam Vance, her estranged, brilliant lawyer brother, her only hope. She pressed the call button, her heart pounding against her ribs. He answered on the second ring. "Katya." His voice was full of surprise. They hadn't spoken since her wedding day when he'd pulled her aside and begged her not to marry Torin. "He's a shark, Katya. He'll eat you alive." She had called him jealous and dramatic. "Liam, She sobbed, the dam of her composure finally breaking. "Liam, I need your help." "You were right. You were right about everything." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of a chair scraping against a floor. "Katja. What's wrong? Where are you?" Liam's voice had shed its surprise and was now sharp with concern. "I'm at home." At the penthouse, she choked out between sobs. "Liam, I'm in trouble. I'm pregnant and torn." "I'm on my way," he cut in. No hesitation. "Don't say anything else over the phone. Are you safe right now?" "Is he there?" "He's here, but in his study." "I'm okay for now. Lock your bedroom door. Don't talk to him. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Just hang on, Katja. I'm coming." The line went dead. For the first time in hours, a tiny sliver of hope pierced through Katja's terror. Liam had always been her protector. Growing up, he was the one who'd patched up her scraped knees and stood up to bullies. He'd gone to Columbia Law while she'd pursued art history at NYU. Their paths diverged, but the bond had been unbreakable until Torrin had systematically severed it, framing Liam's protectiveness as jealousy and disapproval of his wealth. "He can't stand to see you happy, Katja," Torrin had said. And she, a fool, had believed him. True to his word, 30 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. It was the front desk. "Mr. Hawthorne, a Mr. Liam Vance is here to see you." The doorman, of course, assumed Liam was here to see the man of the house. Torrin's voice came over the internal speaker, cold and clipped. "I'm not expecting a Mr. Vance. Send him away." Her blood ran cold. He was trying to isolate her completely. She grabbed her phone and texted Liam frantically. "He won't let you up. He's trying to block me in." Liam's reply was almost instant. "Go to the service elevator at the end of the hall. Now!" Her heart hammered against her ribs. The service elevator was used by catering staff and maintenance. Torrin would never think to monitor it. She slipped out of the living room, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. She could hear Torrin on a phone call in his study, his voice a low, angry murmur. She crept down the long hallway past the gallery of curated art, her hands still protectively on her belly. The service elevator was utilitarian and stark. She jabbed the button and prayed. The doors slid open with a quiet hum, and there stood Liam. He looked older than she remembered. His sandy hair was a little shorter, and there were fine lines around his eyes. But those eyes were the same, fiercely intelligent and full of a protective warmth that she suddenly realized she had been starved of for 3 years. He pulled her into a hug, and she clung to him, the sobs she'd been suppressing finally breaking free. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "I've got you. Let's get out of here." They rode the elevator down in silence. He led her out a back exit into a grimy alley she'd never known existed, a world away from the polished lobby of Park Avenue. The cold night air was a shock to her system. He hailed a yellow cab, and soon they were speeding away, the glittering lights of her prison shrinking in the distance. Liam's apartment in Greenwich Village was the complete antithesis of her penthouse. It was cluttered with books, legal pads, and a friendly-looking ficus tree. It smelled of coffee and old paper. It felt real. He sat her down on a worn leather sofa, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and made her a cup of tea. As she sipped the hot, sweet liquid, the story came tumbling out. She told him everything. The ultrasound, Torrin's whisper, Dr. Sharma's revelation, the medical report which she'd had the presence of mind to shove into her purse, the horrifying confrontation, the gaslighting, Torrin's ultimatum to take her baby and disappear. Liam listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with every word. He took the medical report and read it carefully, his lawyerly gaze missing nothing. When she was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. "That son of a bitch," he said, his voice a low growl. "I knew he was a controlling bastard, but this is sociopathic." He looked at her, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored her own. "Katja, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you." "It's not your fault," she whispered. He's a master manipulator. He isolated me and I let him. Liam shook his head. No more. That ends tonight. First things first, he can't force you to give up your child. Parental rights are not a commodity to be bought and sold. His threats are designed to terrorize you into submission. But he has so much power, Liam. The best lawyers, the judges. He told me he'd ruin Dr. Sharma. He'll try, Liam said, his jaw tight. But Dr. Sharma has ethics on her side, and a good lawyer, which I will make sure she has, can argue that her duty of care to you, a patient in clear distress, superseded her duty of confidentiality to him, especially when he was using that confidentiality to perpetrate fraud and emotional abuse. He started pacing his mind, clearly working. The prenup is another issue. Torren's legal team is the best money can buy. They would have made it ironclad. He's right that you'd likely walk away with very little. But we're not going after his money. We're going for something more important, your freedom, your child, and the truth. He stopped and looked at her. Katya, this is critical. You said you never cheated. Never, she said with absolute conviction. I believe you, he said immediately. Which leaves a gaping hole in the middle of this. You are pregnant. He is sterile. He knew he was sterile. Yet he wasn't entirely surprised by the pregnancy. He was just angry it became public knowledge between you. He already had a plan to take the baby. This suggests he was expecting a child. Just not in this messy way. Her own thoughts, which had been a chaotic storm, began to clear as Liam laid them out with such logical precision. He was expecting a child. She repeated the idea, solidifying. So, how? There are ways, Liam said, starting to list them on his fingers. Surrogacy, for one. But you're the one who's pregnant, so that's out. Adoption possible, but the timeline doesn't fit. That leaves assisted reproductive technology. IVF. The acronym hung in the air. In vitro fertilization. But IVF, with what she asked, confused. His sperm is non-viable. Exactly? Liam said, his eyes gleaming with a hunter's intensity. It would have to be with donor sperm. But you would know if you went through an IVF cycle, Katya. The hormone injections, the procedures. You'd know. She shook her head. No, nothing like that ever happened. They were silent for a moment, both staring at the impossible puzzle. A pregnancy without intercourse with a fertile partner and without a clinical IVF procedure. It made no sense. Unless... Liam began slowly, his eyes narrowing. Unless the insemination happened without your knowledge. The blood drained from her face. What? How is that even possible? I don't know, he admitted. It sounds like something out of a spy novel. But with a man like Torren, a man with infinite resources and a complete lack of a moral compass, we can't rule anything out. We have to start thinking like he does. Where are the vulnerabilities? Where could he have intervened? He grabbed a legal pad and a pen. Okay, let's be systematic. Think back. Katya, any unusual medical appointments? Procedures? Even a routine checkup that felt off? Any new vitamins or medications he insisted you take? She racked her brain, replaying the last 9 months in her head. Torren was obsessed with their health, but she had always seen it as part of his controlling nature. He'd switched her gynecologist about a year ago to a private clinic. He'd vetted a place called the Westwood Wellness Clinic, run by a Dr. Lena Hansen. It was exclusive, expensive, and catered to the city's elite. She'd had her annual checkup there. There was my annual pap smear at the Westwood Clinic, she said slowly. About 9 months ago. It was routine. Doctor Hansen was very professional, very slick. Anything else? Torren started me on a new regimen of prenatal vitamins about a month before that, she recalled. He had them specially formulated by a compounding pharmacy in Switzerland. He said they were the purest, most effective ones available. Liam wrote it all down. Westwood Wellness Clinic. Dr. Lena Hansen, Swiss Vitamins. He looked up at her. It's a long shot, Katja, but this is where we start digging. We need to find out who owns Westwood, who Dr. Hansen is connected to, and we need to get our hands on one of those vitamin bottles. He looked at the blanket draped over her, at her exhausted, tear-stained face. His expression softened. But first you need to rest. You're safe here. Torrin doesn't know this address. I moved 3 years ago after the wedding. The unspoken words hung in the air after she chose him over her brother. Tomorrow, Liam said, his voice firm with resolve. We start fighting back, and our first objective is a strategic retreat. You can't go back to the penthouse. We need to get your essential belongings, your passport, your personal documents, anything of sentimental value. We have to do it fast before he realizes you've bolted and locks everything down. The thought of going back into that gilded cage even for a moment filled her with dread. But Liam was right. She couldn't let Torrin erase every trace of her existence. He'll be at his office all morning, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He has a board meeting. He'll be gone from 8 a.m. to at least noon. Liam nodded. Okay, we have a 4-hour window. We go in, we get your things, and we get out. And then we disappear while I start digging into Mr. Torrin Hawthorne's beautifully curated world. I have a feeling we're about to find some very ugly secrets hidden in the fine print. That night, huddled on Liam's sofa, Katja finally slept. It was a restless sleep, punctuated by nightmares of cold whispers and icy smiles. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone in the dark. She had an ally, and they had a plan. The great Torrin Hawthorne had made a critical error. He had pushed her so far that she had nothing left to lose, and in doing so, he had transformed his polished, docile wife into an adversary. He had no idea the war he had just started. The next morning, the city was shrouded in a gray, determined drizzle that matched Katja's mood. Liam had already been up for hours, a pot of strong coffee brewing, his laptop open on the dining table, which was now Command Central. I did a preliminary search on the Westwood Wellness Clinic, he said, handing her a mug. It's a private entity owned by a holding company called Ethelred Capital. Very opaque. But I found something interesting. The listed agent for Ethelred is a law firm, Sloan, Finch & Associates. The name hit her like a jolt. Finch. The doctor who signed Torrin's sterility report was Dr. Alistair Finch. Exactly, Liam said, his eyes glinting. It could be a coincidence, but in this world, I don't believe in them. It seems Dr. Finch didn't just diagnose Torrin. He may have stayed in the family's orbit, or at least his firm did. The connection was chilling. The doctor who knew Torrin's most profound secret was linked to the clinic where she had her last checkup before the pregnancy. It felt like a deliberate, carefully woven web. We have to go, she said, her resolve hardening. The clock is ticking. Liam had arranged for a discreet car service, not a yellow cab. Torrin will have eyes, he'd said. Assume we're being watched. The journey back to Park Avenue was fraught with a new kind of terror. This wasn't her home anymore. It was enemy territory. She was a spy on a mission. As planned, Torrin's Bentley was gone from the private garage. They used the service elevator again. Liam carried 2 large empty duffel bags. Essentials only, Katja, he cautioned as they stepped into the silent, opulent foyer. Documents, sentimental items, clothes you can't live without. Nothing he can track. Leave the jewelry he bought you. It's just another set of chains. The penthouse was eerily quiet. It was as if the argument from the night before had been sucked into the expensive upholstery, leaving behind a charged, toxic residue. While Liam stood watch at the door, Katja flew into action. She went straight to their bedroom, a vast space of cool grays and chrome that had always felt more like a hotel suite than a sanctuary. She grabbed her passport, her birth certificate, and a small box of old family photos from her bedside table. She packed jeans, sweaters, and sensible shoes, the clothes of the woman she used to be before Torrin had dressed her up like a doll. She left the designer gowns and jewel-encrusted heels hanging in the closet like the shed skin of a former life. Then her eyes fell on the ensuite bathroom. On the marble countertop sat a sleek silver bottle. Vie éternelle prenatal formula, the elegant script read. Torin's specially compounded Swiss vitamins. Her heart pounded. She grabbed the bottle along with a sealed unopened one from the medicine cabinet. This could be the proof they needed. Her final stop was Torin's study. It was a place she rarely entered, his sanctum sanctorum. The room was dark-paneled in mahogany and smelled of leather and his expensive cologne. It was the heart of his empire and his secrets. "Katya, we need to go," Liam whispered from the doorway. "Just 1 minute," she said, her instincts screaming at her. She went behind his massive desk. She didn't know what she was looking for. His computer was password protected. But in his top desk drawer beneath a stack of neatly organized papers was a slim leather-bound folio. It wasn't a company document. It looked private. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The first page was a contract, a service agreement between Torin Hawthorne and a company she'd never heard of, the Genesis Clinic. Her eyes scanned the legalese until they landed on a phrase that made the air freeze in her lungs. For services rendered in the procurement and cryopreservation of donor gametes. Donor gametes. Sperm. She flipped the page. It was a profile. A donor profile. Donor 734. It listed his physical characteristics, height, hair color, eye color, all remarkably similar to Torin's. It listed his academic achievements and a clean bill of health. But the name was redacted, blacked out with a thick marker. Then she saw the payment schedule, a series of large wire transfers from a private account of Torin's to the Genesis Clinic. And below that, a second set of payments. A monthly retainer paid to a woman, Serafina Dubois. The memo line for each payment was the same consulting fee. Who was Serafina Dubois? A consultant for what? And why was Torin paying a fertility clinic for donor sperm when he was supposedly trying to have a baby with his wife, Katya? Now Liam's voice was urgent. She snapped a picture of every page with her phone, her hands shaking so badly the first few were blurry. She shoved the folio back in the drawer and ran out of the study, her heart threatening to beat its way out of her chest. As they were about to leave, the main elevator dinged. Her blood turned to ice. It couldn't be Torin. He was at his board meeting. The elevator doors slid open and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 60s, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her silver hair styled in a flawless chignon. Her face was a mask of aristocratic disdain. It was Jessamine Hawthorne, Torin's mother. She surveyed the scene, Katya clutching a purse, Liam holding 2 duffel bags, and her thin lips curled into a semblance of a smile. It didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Well, well," she said, her voice as crisp and brittle as old money. "Leaving so soon, Katya? And with your brother, the little radical." I see Torin's assessment of the situation was, as always, astute. Liam stepped in front of Katya protectively. "Mrs. Hawthorne, we're leaving." Jessamine's gaze swept over him dismissively before landing back on Katya. "Are you foolish little girl. Did you really think you could just walk away? Did you think my family would allow a complication like you to disrupt everything?" "This has nothing to do with you, Jessamine," Katya said, finding her voice. "Oh, but it has everything to do with me," she replied, taking a step closer. The scent of her expensive perfume, Jean Patou's Joy, filled the air, a cloying, suffocating fragrance. A legacy is at stake. The Hawthorne name. My grandchild. Her eyes dropped to Katya's stomach and her expression softened into something that for a terrifying moment looked like warmth. "You don't have to run, dear. We can be reasonable. Torin is angry, yes. He is proud. But he can be managed. I can talk to him." She opened her handbag and pulled out a checkbook. "You are carrying a Hawthorne. That makes you important to us. But you are not equipped to be its mother. Give us the child. I will personally see to it that you are set up for life. A new name, a beautiful home in the south of France. Anything you desire. You can live out your days in comfort. All you have to do is sign the papers after the birth and walk away. It was the same offer Torrin had made, but coated in a veneer of matriarchal concern that was somehow more repulsive. She wasn't just offering to buy the baby. She was offering Katya a golden cage in exchange for her soul. "He is not a Hawthorne," Katya said, her voice shaking with rage. "I don't know who he is, but he is not a Hawthorne, and he is my son. Mine. He is not for sale." Jessamine's mask of civility crumbled. Her face hardened, her eyes flashing with a venomous fury that was so much like her son's. "You ungrateful little tramp! You come into my son's life with nothing, and this is how you repay him, by opening your legs to some stranger and trying to pass off your bastard child as his." "That's enough," Liam said, his voice deadly calm. "We're done here." He took Katya's arm and steered her toward the service elevator. Jessamine's voice followed them down the hall, shrill and laced with panic. "You won't get away with this. Torrin will find you. He will take that child from you, and he will leave you with nothing. You will be ruined. Do you hear me? Ruined." The service elevator doors slid shut, cutting off her tirade. Katya collapsed against the wall, trembling uncontrollably. She had known Torrin was a monster, but now she knew the monstrosity was inherited. The entire Hawthorne family was rotten to the core. They didn't care about a child. They cared about an heir, a commodity. Back in the car, speeding away from that life for good, Katya showed Liam the photos on her phone. He scrolled through them, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Genesis Clinic," he muttered. "Donor 734. Serafina Dubois." He looked up at her, his eyes dark with a chilling realization. "Katya, this is darker than we imagined. He wasn't just hiding his sterility. He had a plan, an elaborate premeditated plan to create an heir using a donor, and he was going to pass the child off as his own." "But how did I get pregnant?" she cried, the question still tormenting her. "If I didn't have IVF, how did the donor sperm?" Liam looked at the picture of the vitamin bottle, then back at the legal documents on the phone. "I don't know for sure," he said slowly, his voice grim. "But I have a sickening theory. It's called cryptic insemination. It's highly unethical, illegal in most places, and almost impossible to prove. But for a man with Torrin's resources and connections to Dr. Finch's network and a private clinic, he wouldn't need your consent if he could bypass it entirely." The implication was horrifying. The vitamins from Switzerland. The private clinic. Dr. Hansen. Had her routine checkup been anything but? Had she been inseminated like livestock without her knowledge or consent? It was a violation so profound she couldn't wrap her mind around it. "Now we have a name," Liam said, his voice like steel. "Serafina Dubois. She's the key. We find her. We find out her role in all this, and we find out the identity of donor 734. He looked at Katya, his hand covering hers. "This is our new mission. We're not just escaping Katya. We're hunting." They went to ground, retreating to a secluded family cabin in the Catskills. The isolation was a balm to Katya's fractured nerves. While she focused on her health, Liam converted the rustic living room into a war room. He hired a sharp private investigator, an ex-cop named Marcus Thorne, who began charting the dark constellation of Torrin's deceit, the doctors, the clinics, and the mysterious Serafina Dubois. The first breakthrough came from the unopened bottle of Swiss vitamins. Liam had it sent to a lab for analysis. The results were sickening. "It's worse than we thought," Liam said, his face grim as he read the report. The pills weren't just nutrients. They contained a powerful sedative and a cocktail of hormones designed to optimize fertility. The clinical words painted a horrifying picture. "He was drugging me," Katya whispered, the violation stealing her breath. She had been an unwilling participant in her own pregnancy. Her anger, once a spark, now hardened into cold, unbreakable resolve. Soon after, Marcus Thorne's investigation bore fruit. The money trail laundered through shell corporations led him to Serafina Dubois. He found her address in a discreet Soho apartment building. "I have to see her," Katya declared, her voice firm. The time for hiding was over. They approached with caution. While Liam and Marcus waited nearby, Katya went to the building alone, her heart a steady drum against her ribs. She buzzed the apartment. "My name is Katya Hawthorne," she said into the intercom, her voice clear. "We need to talk about Torin." After a tense silence, the lock clicked open. The woman who answered the door. Serafina was not the cold accomplice Katya had envisioned. She was elegant, with intelligent, weary eyes that held a universe of regret. "Mrs. Hawthorne," she said softly, "I knew this day would come. Please come in." Inside the minimalist apartment, the truth finally spilled out. "I was a geneticist," Serafina began, her hands trembling. "I ran a fertility clinic called Genesis. Torin came to me years ago, obsessed with having a biological heir he knew he could never produce. When I told him it was impossible, he changed the plan. He wanted a child that appeared to be his, using a donor who was a perfect physical match. Donor 734. Katya breathed. Serafina nodded. But that wasn't enough for him. He insisted the child be carried by you to complete the illusion. I told him it was illegal, a monstrous ethical breach. But he had leveraged my brother's gambling debts. Torin paid them, and in return he owned me. He forced me to orchestrate everything. The drugged vitamins, the procedure. Dr. Hansen at the Westwood Clinic was one of his puppets, too. Her voice broke. "I am so sorry. I've lived with this guilt every day." The confession was damning, but one final crucial question remained. Who was the donor? Katya asked, her voice trembling. Who is my baby's father? A fresh wave of fear washed over Serafina's face. Torin's cruelty has layers, she explained. He wanted the donor to be someone he could control completely, an insurance policy. He chose his younger brother, Michael. The name landed with the force of a physical blow. Michael Hawthorne, the disowned artist, the family disgrace. Torin despised him, Serafina whispered. He found Michael, offered him life-changing money to be the donor, and forced him to sign an NDA and disappear. It was his ultimate twisted victory to use the genetics of the brother he hated to create the heir he would raise as his own. Armed with Serafina's sworn affidavit, Liam's team moved swiftly. They located Michael Hawthorne living a quiet, anonymous life in a small town on the coast of Maine. He was a painter of melancholic seascapes, a man haunted by a deal he had never fully understood. Katya traveled to Maine to meet him. Standing on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the Atlantic, she saw a man who shared Torin's frame, but none of his menace. His eyes were kind. They were her baby's eyes. "I am so sorry," Michael said, his voice thick with regret. "I never knew." In that moment, standing beside the stranger, who was the biological father of her child, Katya felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. He was not a ghost. He was family. The final confrontation was not a dramatic showdown, but a swift legal execution. Liam presented Torin's lawyers with their arsenal, Serafina's testimony, the lab reports, Michael's statement, and the threat of criminal charges for assault and unlawful insemination. The story, if made public, would not just tarnish the Hawthorne name, it would obliterate the entire empire. Jessamine Hawthorne attempted a desperate smear campaign, but against the mountain of evidence it was useless. Faced with total ruin, Torin folded. The divorce was quiet and absolute. The fraudulent prenup was voided, and Katya accepted a settlement that would ensure her child's security. She refused to take a penny more of his blood money. Torin relinquished all paternal rights in exchange for their silence on Michael's identity, a final pathetic attempt to control a narrative he had already lost. Katya walked away from the marriage with her freedom, her dignity, and the precious life inside her. 2 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy boy. She named him Liam after the brother who had saved her, and gave him the last name Vance. He had his Uncle Michael's kind eyes and his mother's resilient spirit. Michael became a quiet, loving presence in their lives, his art slowly filling with a light that had long been absent. Katya never saw Torrin or Jessamine again. The last she heard, Hawthorne Holdings was in turmoil, and Torrin had become a recluse in his golden penthouse, a king ruling an empire of shadows. He had his legacy, but he was utterly alone, having lost the future he tried so desperately to steal. Katya, however, had found hers. It wasn't a life of opulence, but it was real, and it was free. Katya's journey started with a shocking betrayal in the cold, sterile light of an ultrasound room, and ended with her reclaiming her strength, her identity, and her future. She escaped a gilded cage, exposed a web of lies that ran deeper than she could ever have imagined, and fought for the most precious thing in her life, her child. Her story is a powerful testament to resilience, the unbreakable bond of family, and the fact that truth is a power that even a millionaire's money cannot suppress. What would you have done in Katya's position? Let us know in the comments below.